Nobody could not like Candy. Candy just charmed the birds out of the trees. There's only been 2 actresses in my experience who could manage to communicate to people that they weren't allowed into their private territory. One of them was Candy Darling and the other one was Garbo.
Hello and welcome to Artifacts, a living archive dedicated to preserving the first-person stories of queer, avant-garde, and underground culture, told by those who lived it. Today's interview is part of our series Gender Benders, showcasing the groundbreaking icons who transcended the boundaries of traditional gender and identity. This episode spotlights Candy Darling, the legendary Warhol superstar whose life embodied both the glamour and the struggles of trans existence in the 1960s and 70s. Born in Long Island, Candy grew up not far from Christine Jorgenson, whose pioneering transition gave her an early vision of what was possible. From a young age, she immersed herself in the Silver Factory fantasy of Lana Turner and Kim Novak, teaching herself femininity through imitation and longing. After venturing to Greenwich Village, Candy found her chosen family in Holly Woodlawn, Jackie Curtis, and Jeremiah Newton, and quickly became a central figure in Off-Off Broadway. She later starred in the Warhol films Flesh and Women in Revolt, cementing her place as one of the most luminous icons of the Factory era. Immortalized in Lou Reed's Candy Says and in Peter Hujar's haunting final photograph, Candy's presence continues to resonate as both inspiration and elegy. This film is a composite portrait woven from the voices of Candy's friends and collaborators, including Ron Link, Samuel Adams Green, Holly Woodlawn, and Jeremiah Newton, who share their memories of her artistry, resilience, and indelible mark on queer culture.
The first time I met Candy, I was with Libra, Christopher Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan, and there was this vision in a trench coat. I mean, this is 1 o'clock at night, and she's wearing dark glasses, red lips, and she's just like, underneath this lamppost, just posing, so the key light just like hit her face. And I said, who is that? And Libra said, oh, that's Candy Darling. She's full of herself. So she's standing over there, and this little hustler kid comes up to her. Hey, baby, whatever. I don't know what she said, but, she obviously wanted no part and insulted him. And she had an ice cream cone. He took a comb and it went right in her face. And there was Candy with this cone, this ice cream just dripping. And I said, Libra, let's go help her. And so that was the first time I ever met Candy.
She became Candy Darling. She resigned herself to not showing her face for the world to see. Literally, she had to stay in the dark and wait. She didn't go out of her house in Long Island during the day. She would come in at night, and she would leave at night. And she would come in by cab. She'd take a cab from the train station, and she would leave by cab. Her mother added to the fuel, not wanting the next door nosy body neighbors to see what was going on, and don't get the mail, don't get the paper, don't open the door, don't do this, don't do that, don't go in the backyard even. It was a very modest house. It was small, Cape Cod, 79 First Avenue was the address. Very plain. They didn't do anything to extend the house, make it larger. And I don't even believe there was a second floor. There were only 2 bedrooms in the house, and the one bedroom that she used frequently had 1950s furniture in it, like blonde wood, and just piled high with movie magazines and posters on the wall, and then she had another room which was painted like an orchid color, which was sort of neater, and this is the room she used like when she was ill. Candy would have very few people out there. Jackie would come, Holly would come, I would go. That would be about it. She didn't want anyone to see the house or meet her mother or The mother was very strange, very old-fashioned, and had a very hard life, apparently, with her husband, Mr. Slattery, she used to call him. Well, very quiet and withdrawn, and very secretive. Very, very secretive, and always aware of other people looking at her and wanting to find out business. And I would ask her questions. She'd say, "It's none of your business." I mean, she was like very strange about it, you know, almost to the point of paranoia. And my feeling was that Candy really, Candy's existence really compromised her existence in a way. I never heard the mother discuss any actors with her, or I didn't see anything in the house except in Candy's room, which was like a mountain high of movie magazines. So there was all this stuff. I mean, there was just piles and piles of makeup, and oh, so much makeup everywhere. The one makeup she loved was Max Factor Nude Ivory, it was called. She loved Revlon products, Ultima products, and she always loved red lipstick. She liked Rusty Red a lot. That was in style up until she died. I never saw her wear pink or anything like that. She loved watching Anita Ekberg, who I met the other day, and I could see why. I mean, what a camp. I mean, she's like unbelievable. When I met her, I could hear Candy's voice saying, "Do you believe this one?" She taught Madonna how to put her eye makeup on. And then, of course, she liked Jungle Gardenia as a perfume. I mean, Jungle Gardenia Joan Crawford used to wear. So when she was in a Joan Crawford mood, she would wear that. She was a hairdresser. She had a license.
She went to school for that?
Yeah.
Oh, she did?
The DeVern School of Beauty, D-E, capital V-E-R-N, School of Beauty, which was in Rockville Center or some awful place like that.
Wow!
And sometimes she would give these old ladies haircuts and dye jobs. They would be very, very unhappy with it because it wasn't what they wanted. But she felt that they deserved to be more glamorous for their husbands. You know, "I want you to look like Lana Turner in a Prodigal. Your hair has got to be dripping down your back." And the old woman would say, "You know, I don't want to look like that. I just want the same haircut I got, you know, for years. I want it just this way." No, you have to look glamorous, you know. She had hairdresser friends. They used to dye her hair. And her best friend, one of her best friends was Eugene of St. Andre's. And St. Andre at the time was like one of these real top hairdressing salons on 57th Street.
Yeah, right.
And Eugene did her hair. I mean, she was always working on her hair. It's not like just once a month. It's like every other day. Looking beautiful or glamorous, it's a very expensive proposition.
But I must say, all those girls were pretty good at doing their own paint. You know, unlike later, let's say, with Divine, who never could do his own makeup. He always had somebody that had to be there to do it. But again, doesn't that figure to you with people who are passing on the street?
Yeah.
They're going to know how to do it.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Got a lot.
And they've been studying this in magazines, movie magazines especially, by the way. Again, different time. No E.T. Their whole life, they've been studying glamour. You know, at one time I wanted to do a book called, you know, which was called Drag, with a period after each one of them. It was called Dedicated Ritual Artist of Glamour. Because that's what they are.
I ran into Candy during the Pork time when we were doing Glamour, Glory and Gold, and I actually was asked to play Clark Kent to somebody's Superman in a production that Jackie was doing in La Mama, and we had Sam Shepard was in it, and Robert De Niro was in it, and Holly Woodlawn was in it, and Candy Darling was rehearsing something next door, and it was just a really fun thing to be doing, and other people thought so too, I guess. So Candy was so exotic and so beautiful and so just kind of cute. interesting, and I mean the whole thing was just a fascinating package. So I decided, because Jackie Curtis had presented me as the rich uptown art dealer, whatever it was. I don't know what he presented me as, but there I was, and I always had to wear a white suit for my part, and so I was the only uptown element there as a kind of a freak, and I thought, well, then why not just play this role and be like a rich uptown guy? And so I thought it would be fun to, because it was also amusing down there for me, I just court Candy Darling like I was Clark Gable and she was Vivian Leigh. She was wearing a white dress, I was wearing a white suit. I asked her if she'd dine with me after the show, and she said yes. And I had arranged beforehand to have a limousine take her from the backstage next door to Phoebe's and have 24 white roses on the table in the center of the room, where everybody was going to come for their hamburgers afterwards anyway, and there she would be in her long dress, and there I would be her suitor in my white suit. It was a perfect scene, and I knew she'd enjoy it, and so it was my gift to her. And it was perfect, and we sat there and we talked. She was so funny, and I was playing my role, and at one point she told me about her dreams of going to Hollywood and being the first, the one who was going to get such and such a role, and so many directors were going to come after her. She and then at one point in the middle of this soliloquy of dreams, she put her hand on top of mine, a white hand with those red nails, and she looked me in the eye and she said, "Sam, as you listen to all of this, I want you to never forget that I'm really a businessman." Everything with her was just, it was so much fun, and it was always a surprise. She really was a star, and she was a fine lady all the time.
Candy lived with me on 71 East 4th Street, and it was one of those things with the tub in the kitchen. Now, all that time, you understand, I never saw Candy naked. Bath down the hall, tub in the kitchen. Hello? So the only thing I ever experienced were things like, I'd go over to the stove, and there would be some mixture that looked like pea soup, and I was about to throw it out. And Candy said, "What the hell are you doing? That's my wax."
Candy always used a depilatory. She had a tin can from Barton's Candy, and it looked like dried Turkish taffy. In the middle was a spoon sticking out, and she would heat it over the stove until it became in a liquid form, and she would put it on her face and then pull it off. It was called Zip, and it was very painful, and she had to do that every day, or she would get a 5 o'clock shadow. She wanted to make sure that she looked really fabulous at all times, as fabulous as she could look. She didn't want to look like Holly or Jackie, and who had 5 o'clock shadow most of the time.
Yeah.
She wanted to look good. She wanted to look soft like a woman, and glamorous and sexy and all those things.
Because Candy did not have an easy way of it before hormones. We would sit and tweeze this stuff, and then of course that makes little bumps. Under scrutiny, you can see, beard. She worked very hard, is what I'm saying, to keep that facade. As they would all laugh, a glittering facade. I'm just a glittering facade. And under this, because sometimes to me it all sounds too serious, was a tremendous sense of humor and irony. We tend to go too serious. A great deal of it was having a good time. I would think one of Candy's biggest thrills would have been passing as a housewife almost.
I lived with her for 2 years, and I never, for once, didn't think that she was a woman, and I never saw her nude, and she was always a lady. When I found out she was sleeping under the stairs in Jackie Curtis's tenement, it was too sad, so I asked her if she wanted to come up and stay with me, because I had a big apartment with 2 floors, and one of them wasn't used, and she was really in terrible shape. So she did come and stay with me. She was on one floor and I was on the other, and that was that. She began to slowly assume a role, and so to the outside world she was really Mrs. Green. I'd be going off to some important meeting with a briefcase and a three-piece suit, and I'd leave the apartment and say, I'll be back about 6, tell anybody who calls, and she would lean out the window for all of Central Park West and 68th Street to here. She'd thrust her bosoms over the windowsill, and like an Italian housewife, she said, "Bring home the mortadella for dinner," or whatever. There was always something. Well, Candy got annoying after a while because she was always there. So, but most of the time she was just a joy and an entertainment to come home to, yet a new comedy act. You never knew what she was going to be up to creating that day. She'd be there with the feather duster, the babushka. She'd have her, she couldn't cook, but whatever it was, whenever I would come home, it was a different female icon type, and there was plenty of space, so we weren't tripping over each other. I'd just come home and there would be an event every day, a new event. It was drawn probably from television. It was probably from the night before. She spent all night long on the combination of the telephone watching bad movies, and she spent most of her time with Tinkerbell, who also stayed up all night, and Tinkerbell was smart, and the two of them were smart together. So she was always full of I Love Lucy episodes, or Lana Turner, and some ghastly movie. Whatever it was the night before, she was the next day.
Candy's obsession was, of course, Kim Novak, Lana Turner, and then did those kind of impressions of, Lana Turner from Ziegfeld Girl. That was easy for Candy. And Candy had that voice and could really do those people. Her imitation, Connie Bennett, of that thing of what the Constance Bennett, I forget when she says something to a guy, where the guy says to her, she's going, she's just, "Oh, don't cry, kitty, don't cry." And she whips around and says, "Cry, I'm not crying, you fool, I'm laughing. Now get the heck out of here." She loved doing that imitation. Constance done it over and over.
And as a little boy, she used to draw, when her parents would go out, she would put colored lights in the bathroom and put bubble bath and colored bubble bath, and she would enact scenes from The Prodigal. So, she did this, and she was very young, before I knew her. She did imitations and impersonations for her family, and until they got sick and tired of it. And she would watch the same movie over and over and over again until she got everything down. And it would be almost like opening a can of schizophrenia. All these voices would start coming out, and put down that gun. What do you mean? But all these voices, and she would get them. She would mime them really very well.
If you asked her to do her imitation of Marilyn Monroe, she would go right into Joan Crawford and be so accurate, you couldn't believe it. She could play any role that she wanted to, including James Dean with a swagger. But never what you asked her to do.
Candy was still fooling guys. She was taking that risk. She would come to rehearsal late and say, "Oh, well, I have this cab driver outside. I haven't paid him. Can you pay him?" And you could not read Candy. I bet more often was go out with straight men. And then certainly later on, Candy became almost like, I shouldn't say it, but I will, like a lesbian. She took on women as great friends with a fervor, not with men. Not at all. I think something about these people, again, you had to idolize these people, or they weren't interested in you. A lot of people that would be around Candy would be fans. Mm-hmm. A guy wrote a book a few years ago on Candy who was insane about Jeremiah. Drove me crazy. I hated all those people. I just did. It was like, you take her home.
I don't think Candy wanted a sex change. I think she knew that if she didn't get a sex change, she could never hope to attract a heterosexual male. Sex to her was very painful, and she didn't like it. I remember once she said to me in Flushing, I remember the street corner and everything. I remember her taking me by my shoulders and spinning me around and saying, you know, it's easy for you. She said, you're a gay man. You go with another gay man. What about someone like me? Who do I go with, a freak? She said, a real man won't have me. If he finds out what I am, he'll kill me. Or a freak will want something very strange out of me. She said, and you know how hard it is to get fucked? She said, it hurts. It hurts, and I bleed and I cry. And I was very shocked by it, and I felt very bad for her. Because there were so very few venues for people who were transgendered, people had to really think about what to do. And the obvious thing was prostitution. Candy had one man that she saw who was a MC of a radio show, a very popular radio show. So she saw him all the time until he started, in bed during the act of sex, he started calling her a faggot. And she got so angry, she hauled off and punched him. She said, now who's the faggot? And she left. And she said he never got over it because he would see her and he would, like, you know, start shaking, quivering, and she was never quite sure if that was part of the, if that was part of his scene, that he wanted that type of scene, you know. But she was very angry. She felt she wasn't a faggot. The word gay wasn't in use then regularly, but she felt she was a special person. It was like she would see him, I think it was once a week, and he would give her money. And it wasn't a lot, but it was enough in those days because New York wasn't that expensive for her to sort of coast along. And then she had a friend named Seymour Levy, who I don't think is alive anymore, and he lived on Bleecker Street. He arranged dates. He was quite a character. I mean, a very unattractive, heavy-set man who wore Bermuda shorts all the time, even in the dead of winter, because he was on speed. They all were on speed, so it was always hot. And the New York winters wouldn't bother you if you took amphetamines. Holly went there. Jackie certainly went there as a boy, and of course Candy was there. He would arrange assignations, I know, for Candy. I'm not sure about Holly or Jackie. But I knew about the boys because I once kidnapped one of the boys. I went there and I just took him home with me. And I said, you're not going back to that place. He was like 13 years old. I sent him back to Florida. I mean, he was just this really young kid who ended up there. And I thought he was, the whole scene was so disgusting. And I was so above everything. I mean, I just really was very chagrined by it. And I really took a Carrie Nation stance. And I went there and I caused a lot of problems for him. Me and Candy, and we took this kid with us, and we got him back to Florida. Young kids, like 14, 13-year-old boys. But kids he kept an eye on because people would come up to his house and go in the bedroom, and everyone would sit in the living room having coffee or watching TV, and then when the deed was done, that was it, you know? And this was a little bit before my time, but I heard about it. Yeah. And then when I started going up there, I realized what the scene was right away. And he wanted me to go out with people. I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in that. I didn't need money like that. And I wasn't a runaway. I had my own apartment in Queens, and I had an income from my father. So I didn't need to do that, but Candy would tell me stories about him.
She did actually go one step about being married to a straight guy. It was partly my sense of perverseness, but Mom kept calling from Connecticut and saying, Sammy, we don't see you enough anymore. You've gone to New York and you've left us here. We don't know who your friends are. Why don't you come home for weekends? What, are you too busy with your family? Other people are so important. You're running off with all those Rothschilds and you don't see your family. We want to know who you're seeing, what you're doing. So I thought, bitch, I'll get you. So I called up one day and I said, Mom, I hope you don't mind, this is kind of short notice, but I'd really like to bring someone home for you to meet. Somebody who's very close to me. In fact, she lives here. And Mom, I know how you and Dad really like to give dinner parties. So I think this would be an appropriate time for all of the friends that I knew growing up that were your friends to come and meet this actress. She's got a theatrical name. You know, actresses have to call themselves. Her name is Candy Darling. And so we'll be on the Friday afternoon train, and maybe we should have a family dinner on Friday night and then have the president of the university and all of your friends. Maybe 40 people for dinner would be appropriate. Sorry. So Candy and I just decided to go to Middletown, Connecticut and go through the whole thing. Unfortunately, that was the week that there was a 4 or 5 page article on Candy Darling in the Village Voice, which let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. Not too subtly, but enough so that everybody would know. So I'm sure my mother, calling those 40 or 50 people for dinner, one of them told her that Candy Darling was a man. And to their credit, my parents played the whole thing through as if it was a really good Doris Day movie. Everybody was chipper. My father kissed her on the cheek before taking her up to the guest bedroom on Friday night. On Saturday, 40 people came for dinner, buffet, including the president of the university, and nobody blew it. And Candy went through the closets with my mother to find something appropriate to wear. And the whole thing was just played to the end. And it was, in fact, it was played beyond the end because I had to go back to New York on Sunday night, and Candy, and I think Jeremiah Newton had joined us by this time, Candy and Jeremiah stayed, and my mother and Candy sat around talking about how to hem curtains and how to make baked potato casserole and with marshmallows, and it was a wonderful test to my parents' devotion to me. There was another time when I took her to Middletown, Connecticut, which was when she was having a tooth crisis. She was always having a tooth crisis, but this was a bad one, and it was going to cost about $2,000 to really fix her mouth so that she wouldn't have to, she was missing a front tooth at one point, and she was using chiclets. She was gnawing off the edges and jamming the chiclets in between the two teeth until the candy part dissolved, and she'd have to do it again. She didn't look really good with a missing tooth, but there was no money to fix it. So yeah, it was a good gimmick, which is why you see her photographed with her mouth closed a good deal of the time. You also see her with her head down because she had a huge Adam's apple. So I decided to use Wesleyan once again as my playground. And so we had the world premiere. Was it the world premiere? Maybe it wasn't. Of Women in Revolt. We had a showing at the University Theater, and we sold tickets, and there was a $5 surcharge for Candy's teeth. And the whole university turned out, and Candy was the star, and she came out after the showing of this thing, and she answered questions. People would say, the students, everybody knew who she was. They sat through the film. They paid an extra $5 for her teeth. Everybody, there must have been 1,200 students, mind you. Everybody was cool. Nobody did anything uncool. People would say, Candy, how's Holly Woodlawn? And she would say, no, where's Holly Woodlawn now? And Candy would say, up to here. Or whatever it was. It was a wonderful question and answers thing afterwards. And that was just another Candy story involving Middletown, Connecticut.
Candy knew this guy, his name was Seymour Levy, who lived on, I think, Bleecker Street. He used to have just a lot of people over all the time, like I suppose you could say he had a salon, you know. He had every fucking lunatic in his house, you know, including young little boys, which he liked, and drag queens and Candy, you know. And then, one day, you know, we went to Seymour's because Seymour had a color television. I was a Barbra Streisand freak. And she was doing, Color Me Barbara. So we went, you know, to Seymour's to see it in color. And I met Jackie Curtis. Candy and Jackie had just done this Warhol film called Flesh. So, you know, Jackie Curtis was now a movie star. We watched Barbara. That's what we all had in common. Barbara. And so the three of us became friends.
They were truly fascinated with Shotzi, Sugar, and Loco from How to Marry a Millionaire. I mean, I think that's where the trio really formed. So that was their pattern. And they even referred to each other as that. Betty would probably be Holly. Holly was the most common, always. Whatever that common end of, less ephemeral, less, more working class, let's put it that way, blue collar girl. Candy was certainly the ephemeral, lost Kim, Lana, drunk and crazy. Very easy for her to act for me in those days, to be out there, you know, and kind of like I was insanely wrapped up in Sunset Boulevard at that time. You know, I'm probably already seen that 40 times in my whole fucking life.
Jackie wasn't serious. Jackie was trying to make his body into an art form. He was trying to do something perhaps a little harder. He thought he was James Dean in a way. He went through these shticks where he would be very super masculine, or he would be, you know, Tugboat Annie type of woman, you know, real tough broad wearing a ripped stockings and a tight dress. But he never really thought he was a gorgeous, gorgeous woman. Holly I never discussed it with. Holly, I think, is Holly, a transgendered person. Holly just wanted to enjoy herself and have a good time and live for today and not for tomorrow. Jackie really would have been very happy being on a television series as a nutty next door neighbor, and he had the chance to do it, and they taped him, but they felt on Rhoda that he was just too much having a drag queen as a neighbor. So they wrote him out after shooting like 2 or 3 episodes. Candy, on the other hand, had the option of doing nightclubs and films, and she was very unusual, very much like Divine. Divine was an extremely talented person, and I don't compare them in any way, except there was really nobody quite like them. They were very talented, very unusual, and when they were on stage, you knew something special was there. Candy used to talk about the future and say what would happen to each of them. Just like in the movie Vain Victory, she said, I will go on to be a glamorous movie star in Hollywood and step over my friends to get to the top. Jackie's going to end up as a housewife giving blowjobs, and Holly's going to end up on the Bowery drunk and pissing in her pants. She said that's exactly what's going to happen. In a sense, it did happen. I mean, well, Jackie ended up dead. I mean, under very tawdry circumstances. And Holly survived. I mean, Holly survived, and she's doing extremely well, and she's very happy in L.A. So I guess Candy was wrong there, and Candy, of course, ended up this frozen image on screen, which she always wanted to be an actor. Yeah, she felt she was good enough, and she realized that she had problems because of what she was, and she felt that she had a good chance, though, with Andy as a protector. Candy always said she was going to meet Andy, and this was something very important to her. Because, you know, simply, there were not that many scenes. People were not as sophisticated as they are now, and the Warhol scene titillated a lot of people, and the whole pop art movement. Candy knew who Barbette was, and she did a lot of reading. She knew there was a place for her within an art movement. She was very smart about that. I mean, she knew a lot of things. And Candy was always very polite to Andy and Mr. and Andy and blah, 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 blah. And she was very tolerant of him, despite anything anyone would say about him. She was very patient. She tried to do everything okay for the factory and everything. I mean, I don't think they treated her very well. I think that they didn't pay her what she deserved, and I think they could have been more helpful to her in many ways, and they certainly had the money and the resources, but they didn't want to. You know, they were not very forthcoming in financial rewards.
No.
After Warhol had dumped Candy and had nothing else for her to do, Candy looked at me one day, this is very towards the end, and said, "You know, Ron, I'm on everybody's party list and nobody's work list." You know, because she would be at every opening, putting on more makeup and more makeup. I had no idea she was sick, by the way, ever. You know, it was very well hidden. I just had no plays at the time. And there was a terrible guilt and burden from feeling like probably a pretentious Svengali, which I was certainly called at times, that you had nothing for your children to do. I mean, Andy fixed Candy's teeth and things like that eventually, but they eventually became party girls. It's like a bad 60s movie, Party Girl, as opposed to actors. I remember Andy, for instance, giving Candy, and mostly Holly, like $100 bills. He was very generous that way. Once in a while he'd say, okay, here, you know, and but that meant they had to hang. They had to hang a long time for that 100, or whatever it might be, and be amusing. It was like a jester, you know. And drag queens at that time, even after me, became trinkets for parties. You know, it was to me, very French or very worldly. It's like you weren't anybody unless you had a drag queen on your shoulder. Late 60s, nobody knew what the fuck was going on yet. I mean, in terms of drag, even though I was doing it. I mean, I remember to this day, as Bob will verify for you, Ellen Stewart, when I wanted to take Candy into La Mama, she said, "There will be no drag queens in my theater." They didn't get it. It was something dirty. It was still, that's interesting to me. It was still something dirty. Drag queen, street, hustler, cocksucking, I think it would have, it went there as opposed to a performer. Right. I tried to make them, and did succeed in making them indeed actresses. You know, as crazy as that sounds. They became actresses. The only one that didn't was Holly.
I mean, basically, it was a vehicle for Holly, originally, as a sequel to Trash. I mean, this is true. Holly got involved with a robbery.
Right, I know that.
Yeah, and then she was in jail for a while, and Andy didn't really care what happened to Holly until the movie came out and got wonderful reviews, and Holly was singled out, and money started coming in the box office. That changed Andy's mind completely. So it was written basically as a vehicle for Holly's talent, but it soon became apparent that Holly wasn't in any condition to carry a film. She forgot things, she had no memory. They had a big dinner party that she was the hostess of, and her head went down in the soup. So there was no real script per se. There was just an idea that, it's these three women, and Candy's the glamour puss, and Jackie's the bitch, the woman liberationist, and Holly's the drunk. And they all get together and they try to find women's movement, and Candy, you got to stand here and you're having a love affair with your brother. So there's no script. Basically, Candy told me the concept, I think, was Paul Marcy's, not Andy's. And basically, if you were witty, the camera stayed on you. If you weren't witty, Candy said, you see the camera start to move away. And the trick was to keep the camera on you as long as possible. And, to be constantly witty and to be constantly funny and to be really fabulous. And most people could not top Candy except at the end with Jonathan Kramer. The last scene in Women in Revolt, remember when he says, in fact, she said, you're not a blonde, you're not a blonde on a bum trip, you're a bum on a blonde trip. She says, isn't it true that your mother died and the funeral was down the block and you didn't even go to it and you were making a film nearby? And Candy says, I sent flowers. And that was it. At the last scene, he's pulling her by her hair off stage, you know, and she's screaming and yelling. Yes, it's a real ensemble piece.
Yeah.
And
Do you think it's Candy's best role?
oh, I think she's hilarious. And yeah, I think it's the best Warhol film certainly that she's in. And she's very, very funny.
Basically that and Flesh, isn't it?
Well, Flesh she's in for like 3 seconds.
Right.
But so it's really the one, and they souped her up. They said, "Oh, Candy, you're the next star. You're the big star. You're the one. Blah 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 blah. You'll carry the studio on your shoulders." And I mean, they souped her up, and she really believed that she was going to make another film for them. But in reality, he was already tired of using Candy and people like Candy. And he wanted to start using women again and do different kinds of films, like Frankenstein, like Dracula.
Yeah.
So we need drag queens. They're better than women, and blah blah blah. And they started using drag queens, and then that time was over after a couple of films, and then they were going to do something else. So Candy, I mean, people wrote about saying that, you know, where are these wonderful comedians that were seen in Warhol films? They're not being used anymore. Why is that? And it was like water off of a duck's back. I mean, Andy didn't care what they said because these films were successful and now he was on to other things.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to realize that there weren't other people around like this then. You know, it wasn't like there was not anything in abundance. I think the only place even one went for drag in those days was the 82 Club.
I remember seeing tourist buses, 4 or 5 huge buses pulled up in front of the Club 82 and then sort of encircling that block. And I always thought it was kind of amazing in a way, the double standard that people would pay all sorts of money to see drag queens, and yet they'd be the first one to hit one over the head with a rock. So, I mean, you know, it was sort of a perverse thing. They were very tough, and they had very hard lives, and they were used to traveling and being very cautious and everything, and they were really tough guys masquerading as women. Some of them would go out and drag, but most of them dressed like men. Mm-hmm. So Candy used to go occasionally, if she had somebody who would take her to 82 Club and see the shows. I mean, there was nothing much to see. People walking around and looking glamorous and making, you know, standing still as like showgirls. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was really no great talent there.
Right.
But she felt that with the other sex changes, that there were so many of them had really hard and tragic lives, and she was determined that she wasn't going to end up like these people. Later, the Gold Bug, Telstar, the 10th of Always. All these clubs are interesting because Andy used to go to them, and Andy found them very, very fascinating. These were like sort of low-life people living their lives, what they created, within the confines of these dark, gloomy clubs. And of course, music was a very important part of it. I mean, the Motown sound was very heavy. A lot of Supremes and people like that, Four Tops, and of course, Chris Montez, who was a wonderful singer, The More I See You, and Time After Time. And in those days, they played the same records instead of changing them every month. They kept the records on, and they played them over and over and over again. And if a record was removed, people would not go to the club. They would complain until the record was brought back. We used to go up to the Jewel Box Review at the Apollo Theater. We went up there once together. There were a lot of people on stage in their 60s and 70s, and one in particular fascinated us both. His name was Bruno Le Fantastique. Bruno was at the time in his late 60s, and half of him was gowned and with long Veronica Lake hair, and half of him was in a suit, an evening suit for a man, and he would dance with himself. And wouldn't turn, and then there was a man dancing with a woman, beautiful woman, with long hair on one side, and then he would turn, and it was this gorgeous woman dancing with a handsome man. And Candy always thought, she said, you know, that's the problem. That's the whole problem about being a person who's trapped between two worlds. You can come here and watch him, and you can see it yourself. Half of you is a man, half of you is a woman, but which side is going to win? That's the question, you know.
How clear was she about the fact that she was dying?
She loved the idea. It was perfect. I'm at my prime. I'm at my beauty. What a wonderful corpse I'll make. She almost seemed amused that they cut her open and they found a tumor. It's because of a baby in her tummy. She didn't deal with emotions. She dealt with the drama. And the drama of dying was as Maria Montez as it could be. People that visited her in the hospital were aware she was dying.
Yeah.
And the hospital took the whole act, too. I mean, nobody made any protest. She was, she had her own room, she had flowers, she had visitors, she had Miss Darling this, Miss Darling that, and they must have been bathing her towards the end.
Sure.
But it was still, you're the most beautiful patient we've ever had. You know, these are Jamaican nurses.
Yeah.
She got everybody to get in on the act.
Yeah.
Some things had to be discussed about whose name she was going to be, because the father insisted on having those little sympathy calling cards, and it was James Slattery was the name on it, and we felt that was probably not appropriate for all the people that were coming to see Candy Darling laid out. And she was laid out. People fought over putting wigs on her and putting on dresses. Giorgio da Sant'Angelo changed what was on into something that he designed. Hairdressers did makeup. It was a whole scene on this cadaver. Since Judy Garland died, was there as big or as similar a funeral at Frank Campbell's? The people were lined up around the block. And there were a lot of people there. I paid for the funeral. I think the mother paid some. There was a hefty $400 bill. Things were so cheap those days, that I know I had to come up with at some point. And Andy didn't. Andy didn't. He was asked by a number of people. He said, no, that'll be taken care of.
Artifacts is a free oral histories platform. Please like, subscribe, and visit our website, www.artifacts.movie, for an ad-free, interactive experience with bonus content. If you're able, please make a tax-deductible donation at www.artifacts.movie/donate. Hit the link on screen to watch another Artifacts interview.